Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. We got to talk about those drones, right? All over the news, online, everywhere you look these days. But what if it's not the whole story?
Yeah, there's a lot of buzz about drones for sure. But Dr. Stephen Greer, he's suggesting there's a deeper layer to this.
So for folks who might not know, Dr. Greer, he founded the Disclosure Project. They've got a massive archive of evidence, testimony from whistleblowers, photos, videos. It's all free to explore at dpiarchive.com.
Yeah, and a lot of these whistleblowers, they have been involved in some seriously classified programs. And they're saying there's about to be some really big reveals, stuff about like downed extraterrestrial craft even.
Okay, so right off the bat, let's talk about the $8 to $10 trillion Dr. Greer says is being funneled into these covert programs. That's a huge EE number. Where's the evidence for that? And even if they're IS that kind of money, could all of it really be going to these top secret projects?
Yeah, I mean, 8 to 10 trillion,
Right.
that is a mind-boggling figure for sure. Dr. Greer suggests it comes from things like black budgets, illegal activities, even skimming fractions of pennies from global financial transactions. It sounds like something out of a movie.
So a shadow operation bigger than the entire US government, even if it's a fraction of that amount, it's still an astronomical sum. And if they have that kind of power, why even bother with the drones? What's the point of that smokescreen?
That's where it gets really interesting. Dr. Greer says these whistleblowers he's working with, the information they have is so explosive, so disruptive, that these drones are being used as a distraction.
He calls it gaslighting, right?
Yeah,
Making people question their own sanity, making them doubt anything related to UFOs.
right, exactly. By flooding the news and social media with drone sightings, it creates a kind of UFO fatigue. People get desensitized to the whole topic, and then when something real comes along, they're more likely to just dismiss it as, oh, another drone.
It's clever, but if these whistleblowers have such groundbreaking information, why not just come out with it? What's with the waiting game?
It's a good question. And Dr. Greer doesn't really lay out the specific reasons for the delay. Maybe they're waiting for the right moment or trying to coordinate their efforts, or maybe they're still gathering evidence, building their case.
It's worth noting Dr. Greer's been accused of sensationalism before, so healthy skepticism is always a good thing.
Of course, always. But the idea that a group of high-level insiders are going to blow the lid off this whole UFO secrecy thing, I mean, that's hard to ignore.
It definitely piques the curiosity. So, black sites. What exactly are we talking about here? I mean, I've heard the term, but I'm not sure everyone's up on the lingo.
Sure, so basically a black site is a secret location, heavily guarded, where classified activities take place. The kind of activities that are so sensitive, their existence is officially denied.
Places that officially don't exist, but where some pretty shady stuff might be happening.
Yeah, that's the gist. And according to Dr. Greer, these black sites are where the real action is. He says they're not just storing recovered alien tech, they're reverse engineering it, trying to figure it out and potentially weaponize it.
Okay, so how does anyone even know about these black sites if they're so secret? Where's Dr. Greer getting this information?
Well, that's where the whistleblowers come in. He claims to have a network of contacts within these programs, people who've seen what's going on firsthand, and are willing to risk everything to expose it.
Wow, that takes some serious guts. So, who are these whistleblowers? Retired officials? Or are we talking about people who are still actively involved in these programs?
Dr. Greer says a lot of them are still active, which is pretty incredible, right? These aren't just disgruntled retirees. They're people allegedly in the thick of it, risking their careers, maybe even their lives, to bring this information to light.
So if he's right, and these whistleblowers are telling the truth, this isn't just ancient history. It's an active operation happening right now and potentially on a massive scale.
That's what he's suggesting. And if you think about it, the implications of what they might reveal, it's not just about UFOs. It's about reality, our place in the universe, who's really in control.
Lots to unpack there for sure. But back to those drones for a minute. If they're a distraction, how are they being used to manipulate the public? And why are they suddenly so prevalent now?
Well, Dr. Greer suggests they're being used to mimic UFO sightings, erratic movements, strange lights, appearing and disappearing, the kind of things people usually associate with UFOs. It creates confusion, makes people doubt what they see, and then they just lump any real sightings in with the drones.
So they're muddying the waters, making it hard to tell what's real and what's manufactured.
Exactly, and they're creating this boy who cried wolf
Mhm.
situation. Every time someone sees something unusual and it turns out to be a drone, people stop paying attention. That's what these covert programs want. desensitization to the whole UFO phenomena.
So it's a preemptive strike against disclosure, a way to downplay any shocking revelations that might come from these whistleblowers.
That's Dr. Greer's argument. He thinks the powers that be are getting ready for a huge paradigm shift, and they're doing everything they can to control the narrative.
Bold claim, and one that raises a lot of questions. But if Dr. Greer's right, the stakes are really high. We're not just talking about some blurry photos of flying saucers. We're talking about a battle for the soul of humanity.
And that's what makes it so fascinating. Because for Dr. Greer, this isn't just a physical battle, it's a battle for consciousness.
What does that even mean?
It means the real battle is happening in our minds. How we perceive the world, what we choose to believe, the future we create.
That's deep. But before we get too far down that rabbit hole, let's go back to some of Dr. Greer's other claims. He mentions a staged alien invasion. How realistic is that? And what kind of evidence does he have?
Yeah, that's one we need to dig into because the stage alien invasion theory is probably the most controversial and unsettling part of his work.
It sounds like a sci-fi movie plot, but Dr. Greer insists it's a real threat and one that's been in the works for decades.
He claims the purpose is to create a global crisis, a common enemy that'll unite everyone under a single totalitarian world government. It's the classic problem-reaction-solution play. Create a problem, generate fear, and then offer a solution that gives you more control.
Okay, now I'm getting skeptical. How do you even fake an alien invasion? Convincing billions of people that we're under attack from outer space. That seems pretty far-fetched, even for a super secret organization with trillions of dollars.
It does sound wild. Dr. Greer hasn't given a detailed plan for how it would go down, but he suggests they might use advanced holographic tech, maybe even genetically engineered creatures, to make it look real.
So special effects wizardry meets high-tech lab experiment gone wrong.
Right, and Dr. Greer says this plan's been in motion for decades. They've been using movies and TV shows to subtly condition people to accept the idea of hostile aliens.
So planting seeds of fear in our subconscious so that when the invasion happens, we're more likely to believe it.
That's the idea. And it's true, Hollywood has definitely shaped how we think about extraterrestrials, often portraying them as scary invaders.
So is Dr. Greer right? Are we being prepped for a fake alien invasion? Or is this just, like, conspiracy theory overload?
Tough to say for sure. There's no concrete proof, but the idea of a staged alien invasion is definitely provocative. And it raises some important questions about who's really in control and what their agenda might be.
It's all starting to feel a bit like we're living in a movie, and not a very good one at that. But if these whistleblowers' DO come forward, what kind of impact could it have? Could their revelations actually change the world?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, right? I mean, if they reveal undeniable proof of alien contact, advanced tech being suppressed, a potential staged invasion, it would be huge. It could completely change how we understand reality, our place in the universe. It could change everything.
It would be a total paradigm shift, for sure. But wouldn't that also be incredibly destabilizing? Think about the potential for chaos and panic.
Yeah, there's definitely that possibility. And Dr. Greer acknowledges that the transition to a post-disclosure world won't be easy, but he also thinks it's essential for the future of humanity. We can't stay in denial and secrecy forever. We have to face the truth, even if it's unsettling. We have to work together to create a better future.
Okay, so let's say, just for argument's sake, that there's some truth to these claims. What would be the motive for staging a fake alien invasion? What's the ultimate goal?
Dr. Greer's theory is that it's all about power. A global totalitarian state, a new world order where a small elite controls everything.
A pretty dystopian scenario. But why fake an alien invasion to achieve that? Wouldn't it be easier to just take over directly?
Well, according to Dr. Greer, they need an excuse, a justification, a global crisis, a common enemy that unites people under their control.
Fear makes people compliant. They'll give up their freedom for security.
Exactly. And if you convince people the threat is existential, that we're facing annihilation, then any measure, no matter how extreme, becomes acceptable in the name of protecting humanity.
So mass surveillance, crackdowns on dissent, militarization of society, it all becomes justifiable to fight this alien threat.
That's the logic, and it's definitely disturbing. But Dr. Greer also offers a glimmer of hope. He believes we're not totally powerless. We can influence the outcome with our collective consciousness.
So we're talking about the power of positive thinking. That sounds a little woo-woo to me.
It might sound a bit out there, but Dr. Greer insists we're not just passive bystanders. We have the power to shape our destiny. Our thoughts and intentions can influence events.
He's big on prayer, meditation. He even created an app, C5 Contact, to help people connect with what he calls benevolent extraterrestrials. Is there anything to this? Or is it just wishful thinking?
That's something we'll definitely explore in more depth.
Yep.
But for now, let's keep an open mind. Let's consider all the possibilities, however strange they might seem.
Okay, open minds engaged. But before we get too deep into the consciousness stuff, let's look at the evidence Dr. Greer has presented. What proof does he actually have for these claims of government secrecy, black sites, staged alien invasions?
Good point. That's a crucial question. And that's where we'll pick up next. Dr. Greer has a massive archive of testimony and documents, and we'll dig into some of the most compelling pieces to see what we can make of it.
So buckle up, folks. This deep dive is about to get a whole lot deeper. Okay, so we've laid out some pretty wild claims. Now let's dig into the evidence. Dr. Greer's compiled a massive archive of testimony, documents, you name it. Is there anything that really jumps out? Anything that makes you think, maybe there's something to this?
Well, there are a few things that stand out, especially when you consider how many whistleblowers there are. We're not talking about just a few people on the fringes. Dr. Greer has interviewed hundreds, and many have really impressive backgrounds. Military personnel, pilots, scientists, intelligence officers.
People who are putting a lot on the line. I mean, coming forward with this kind of information could ruin careers, maybe even put lives at risk.
Yeah, exactly. Why would they do that if they weren't convinced they were telling the truth? And many of them have passed polygraph tests. Their stories line up with each other. If an IS all made up, it's an incredibly coordinated and convincing fabrication.
Right, but eyewitness testimony can be tricky. Memories can be fuzzy. People can misinterpret things. What about physical evidence? Anything concrete to back up these claims?
There are a few interesting pieces of physical evidence, although they tend to be pretty controversial. Like the Roswell slides, for example. Photos that supposedly show alien remains from the Roswell crash back in '47.
Oh, Roswell, the classic UFO case, still making headlines all these years later. But even if those slides are real, couldn't they be something else? I mean, not necessarily alien remains.
Oh, absolutely. There are always other explanations, and that's the challenge with a lot of the UFO evidence. It's open to interpretation, like those metallic spheres some people claim have been found at crash sites. Some scientists say they have weird properties pointing to advanced tech, but others say, well, it could just be natural stuff or even man-made debris.
So we're always stuck in this back and forth between belief and skepticism. Every time there's something that looks like proof, there's also a reason to doubt.
Yeah, that's the UFO mystery for you. It's a puzzle with a lot of missing pieces. But that doesn't mean we should just dismiss it. Sometimes the best evidence isn't one big smoking gun, but the smaller details, the patterns that emerge when you put it all together.
Okay, so what patterns do you see? What stands out as particularly intriguing?
It's hard to ignore how consistent the whistleblower testimonies are. They come from different backgrounds, different times, yet they describe similar events, similar technologies, similar cover-up tactics. It suggests there's something going on behind the scenes, a story that's been unfolding for who knows how long.
Okay, so let's talk about that story behind the scenes. Dr. Greer talks about this shadowy control group pulling the strings. Who are these people? What do they want?
He doesn't get too specific, but he suggests they're a network of powerful people from all different areas. Government, military, intelligence, finance, even corporations. He says they're driven by greed and power, wanting to control information and technology for their own benefit.
It sounds like a conspiracy theory, something out of a movie. Is there any real-world evidence to support this idea of a secret elite controlling everything?
There's no question that powerful groups and individuals have a lot of influence in the world. We see it all the time. Whether they're involved in a big UFO cover-up is another question. But what Dr. Greer is talking about definitely taps into that fear a lot of people have that we're not really in control of our own lives.
Like that old saying, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not after you. But let's say, just for the sake of argument, that this control group, Israel, why go through all this trouble to hide UFOs and alien tech? What's the point?
Dr. Greer suggests a few possible reasons. One is the fear of losing control. Imagine if everyone knew, without a doubt, that we're not alone, that there are advanced alien civilizations out there. It would be a huge shock to our society, our religions, everything we thought we knew.
It would change our entire worldview, wouldn't it?
Totally. And people in power often don't like change, especially if it threatens their authority. Another possibility is that they want to exploit this alien tech for themselves. Think about the implications of things like anti-gravity propulsion, advanced weapons, maybe even teleportation.
Like opening Pandora's box. But wouldn't it be better to share that technology to use it to help humanity?
That's the big ethical question. Dr. Greer's argument is that this control group is driven by selfish motives, not the good of humanity. They see alien tech as a way to stay in power, to get richer, to control everyone else.
Okay, so greed and power, the usual suspects. But what about the risks of alien technology? What if it falls into the wrong hands? Maybe keeping it secret IS the best way to protect us?
That's a valid point, and it's something Dr. Greer acknowledges. But he argues that this secrecy is actually making things more dangerous. It's creating fear and paranoia, which could lead to conflict and disaster.
So by trying to control everything, they're making the situation worse.
That's his take. He thinks the only way to deal with the potential risks of alien tech is through openness and cooperation. Share the knowledge, work together to understand it, and then we can make sure it's used for good.
That makes sense, but it also assumes that all aliens are friendly. What about the possibility of hostile extraterrestrials?
That's a question people have been asking for a long time. Dr. Greer believes most alien civilizations are peaceful. He says all those negative portrayals of aliens in movies and TV, that's just part of the disinformation campaign, meant to keep us afraid and divided.
So he's saying the whole alien invasion thing is a made-up threat to justify secrecy and control.
That's what he believes. He says the real danger isn't from out there, it's from within, from our own greed and fear and desire for power. If we can overcome those things, we can create a more peaceful world for ourselves and for any alien visitors who might come our way.
That's an interesting perspective. But if this control group is as powerful as he says, how can we possibly challenge them? How do we expose the truth?
That's where Dr. Greer's call for disclosure comes in. He believes that by bringing the truth about UFOs and alien contact into the light, we can break the control group's grip on information and technology.
Disclosure sounds great, but how do we make that happen?
Dr. Greer believes it starts with us, with the people. We need to raise awareness, educate ourselves and others, demand transparency from our leaders, and support the groups that are working for disclosure. It's a grassroots movement, a battle for hearts and minds.
So we need to get informed, spread the word, and take action.
Exactly. We have to realize we're not powerless. We have a voice, and together, we can make a difference. Dr. Greer sees this as a critical point in history, a time where we can choose a new path. Openness, cooperation, and a greater awareness of our place in the cosmos.
That's a powerful vision. It requires a lot of faith in humanity, though. Do you think we can overcome our own limitations, our greed and fear, and actually make that happen?
It's a big question, that's for sure. I mean, there's no easy answer, but I do think this much is true. The future isn't set in stone. We have a say in how things unfold.
Yeah, we're not just along for the ride. We have the power to make choices, take action. Those things shape the world around us, right?
Absolutely. And for Dr. Greer, a big part of that is this idea of consciousness. Not just individual awareness, but like a collective shift in how we think, a global awakening to this larger reality.
Okay, the interconnectedness of everything, I get that. We're all part of this big web of life. But how does that connect to, like, UFOs and talking to other civilizations?
Well, Dr. Greer believes that our thoughts, our intentions, all of that creates a kind of energy field, and it resonates throughout the universe.
Yeah.
And that field can actually influence what we experience, even our interactions with ETs.
So, like, if we're all focused on fear and negativity, that's what we're putting out there. But if we focus on peace and love, that creates a more positive vibe, attracts more positive things.
Yeah, that's the basic idea.
Yeah.
So like a lot of spiritual traditions talk about the power of thought, of intention. Dr. Greer is applying that to the whole ET contact thing.
Right. So if we want to connect with benevolent beings, we need to be benevolent ourselves.
Exactly. But then it's like, okay, if these advanced ETs are out there, why not just show themselves? Why all the secrecy?
That's what gets me. If they're so advanced and peaceful, just pop in and say hi, right?
Well, Dr. Greer says there are reasons for that. One is this idea of non-interference. They respect our free will, our right to make our own choices, even if those choices are kind of messed up.
So they're, like, observing us from a distance, waiting for us to evolve, to get our act together.
Yeah, that's part of it. He also says they're waiting for us to reach a certain level of consciousness, spiritual, and technological maturity. Because if we're not ready, if we're too aggressive or fearful, that could lead to problems.
Like, if you go barging into someone's house with a weapon, they're not going to be happy to see you. It's got to be a peaceful, respectful encounter.
Exactly. And the stakes are a lot higher when we're talking about ETs, with technology that's way beyond anything we can imagine.
So it's about building trust, showing them we're ready for a positive interaction. But how do you even do that when there's so much secrecy and confusion around the whole UFO thing?
That's why Dr. Greer keeps pushing for disclosure. He thinks if we can get the truth out in the open about UFOs and ET contact, that breaks the cycle of fear and secrecy.
Disclosure makes sense, but how do we make it happen? It's not like these powerful groups are just going to hand over their secrets.
Well, Dr. Greer believes it starts with us. We raise awareness, educate people, demand transparency from our leaders, support the groups that are fighting for disclosure.
So it's a grassroots movement, a people-powered thing.
Yeah, it's about realizing we're not helpless, that we do have power, and that together we can force change. Dr. Greer sees this as a turning point. We can choose a new direction, more openness, cooperation, a better understanding of our place in the universe. It's a big vision for sure, but do you think we can actually pull it off?
It's a huge challenge, no doubt. It requires a lot of faith in humanity, that we can overcome our own weaknesses. Can we do it? I don't know, but I'm willing to try. It's like Dr. Greer says, the future isn't something that just happens to us. We create it.
It's a powerful idea, right? That we have the power to shape our own destiny. And not just for ourselves, but for the planet, maybe even for the galaxy.
So to all our listeners out there, we say this: choose love over fear, choose unity over division, choose to believe in a better future, and then go out there and make it happen.
Yeah, the universe is listening to us. What we focus on, what we believe in, it matters. So let's choose wisely. Let's make a future that's worthy of the stars.
Beautiful. Well, that was quite a deep dive, wasn't it? From government conspiracies and alien tech to consciousness and cosmic connections. It's a lot to wrap your head around.
Definitely a lot to think about. But hopefully it sparks some curiosity, maybe even a little bit of inspiration.
We've explored some pretty big ideas, and I think the main takeaway for me is that we're not just passive bystanders in this whole cosmic game. We have the power to make choices, to create change, to shape our own destiny. And that's pretty amazing when you think about it.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing our own power, our potential, and then taking action. So keep questioning, keep exploring, keep looking up. The truth is out there, and who knows what we might find along the way.
Thanks for joining us on this wild ride, everyone. Until next time, keep an open mind, a compassionate heart, and a sense of adventure.
Thank you for cruising with us on Podcast Cruise. If you enjoyed this journey into the unknown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us bring you more intriguing and thought-provoking podcasts. Stay curious, and we'll see you on the next adventure.